In War Thunder's community, there are a lot of debates that pop up over a wide variety of topics. Whether it's about balance or historical accuracy, it seems like the primary form of communication for the player base. One subject in particular is hotly debated, and that is whether or not fictional vehicles belong in War Thunder. Someone asked for my take on it, so I figured to make for a good video topic. Before I state my stance on them though, I think it'd be best to talk about the criteria for fictional vehicles, and the respective arguments for both sides. There are several types of vehicle that fit under the umbrella of fictional. There are vehicles that are quite literally fictional, ergo they're entirely made up. These would be things like some World of Tanks vehicles, or to some extent, the Panther II in War Thunder. The Panther II is essentially a combination of design proposals, most of which were never meant to be used in conjunction, and some of which were never applied to the actual Panther II itself. So while the vehicle is somewhat grounded, its exact design is made up by Gaijin. Then there are vehicles that were actually designed, but never left paper, or only had a wooden mock-up built. They're not fictional in the sense that they never existed historically, just fictional in the sense that they were never operational. Some examples would be the Italian P-43 heavy tank, the American M1 AGDS, or the British FV-215. In many cases, these vehicles had a lot of thought put into them, and used pre-existing components. As to why people wouldn't want to see these vehicles in War Thunder, it boils down to two main reasons. For one, some people say it ruins their immersion, because they only want to fight vehicles that actually saw service or combat. This doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me, since War Thunder battles aren't accurate to begin with. Nations that were enemies sometimes fight alongside each other, tanks fight other tanks that are 3 decades older than themselves, and a lot of the maps never had battles take place there in reality. The second point is a lot more reasonable. Since these vehicles weren't actually constructed, it can be difficult to get an idea of how they would actually perform. The engineers working on them usually gave estimates, but these can often be over-optimistic, and unforeseen drawbacks or flaws are usually only realized once the vehicle is actually tested. While this does mean the vehicle can overperform, it does give Gaijin more options for balancing. They could change extrapolated stats at will to nerf the vehicle, instead of relying on BR changes or repair costs. For people that do want to see these vehicles in War Thunder, the reasons are less varied. Most want more vehicles from minor tech trees like China, Italy, Japan, etc. These nations typically don't have a lot of vehicles that actually saw service, mostly because their armored forces were underdeveloped. Using so-called fictional vehicles to give these factions more replayability, make their lineup stronger, and generate more income for War Thunder. The other reason for wanting them is quite simple. They're fans of a particular design that was never operational, and would like to be able to play it. I can relate to this pretty well. I think seeing something like the improved M4 would be pretty cool. Given what I just said, it shouldn't be hard to guess what my stance is, but let me explain it further. While I am fine with fictional vehicles in War Thunder, and can think of a few I'd like to personally see, there needs to be some restrictions. First is pretty obvious. The design has to actually be real, not something drawn up by some random person, but a design made by real engineers. Second, the design has to have a lot of reputable documentation, otherwise it won't be added. Without such a safeguard, people could fake or fudge designs. Gaijin usually only requires one primary source or 2 secondary sources, but for the addition of fictional vehicles, they could bump those up a bit. Third, the design has to be practical, ergo, it would have been possible for the nation to build it at that time. For example, in World War II, if Italian engineers sat down and designed a super heavy tank, in the midst of their country falling, that would not fit the criteria. Fourth, the vehicle has to use some components that were actually constructed, whether that be the engine, gun, or whatever. Just something to ground it in reality a bit. In the case of minor nations, fictional vehicles should be used to fill gaps in tech trees. Either that, or they should be used as premiums. For nations like the US, fictional vehicles should be used as limited event vehicles. I don't think it's very likely that Gaijin will take that route though, given they removed all those late war paper tanks from Germany's tech tree, though they could have removed them purely because Germany didn't need them. The Ho reproduction, J6K1, and R2Y2s are all still in the game after all. Anyway, I'm curious what you guys think. I think most people would prefer not to have them in War Thunder, which is understandable. Regardless, I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I'll see you on the next one.
You